You guys would not believe how many people Luis gave leprosy to before he went back to Mexico. It's insane.
No comment. Welcome, everyone, to Unbelievable, the podcast where I, Luis, tell my good friend Kurt two unbelievable stories from history. But here's the catch. One of them is real. One of them is fake.
And I have to figure out which one's which.
That is right. I am former child Luis Mejia, joined here by the artist formerly known as the artist formerly known Kurt Danner.
Nice.
And we have, or at least I have, a couple of great stories prepared for you. Before we get started for the stories, which I am going to be guiding you today through the stories of this episode, I'm taking the reins, trying to once again keep my crown. I was going to say steal my crown back from you, Kurt, but I'm keeping it. I'm going to make sure that crown is so firm on there that I can do backflips and it will stay on.
No, you got it pretty securely. It's on there pretty good.
So before we move on to the two stories I have ready for you today, let's go ahead and get to a quick fun fact like we always do. A fact that will help us determine, set a foundation, set a level, a control group, if you will, of truth and fiction. Fact or fiction. Let's hear a fun fact that you may have prepared for me. I mean, you may not have also. We don't know.
I do have a fun fact prepared for you, but I also have prepared for you an announcement of my own. Longtime viewers of this podcast may have noticed that we are prone to have some audio problems here and there. I've taken credit for one of them. Luis has taken credit for two, and it's exhausting, okay?
And we've both been punished accordingly.
Yeah, we've both been punished accordingly. It's ridiculous. How many times are we going to have to take credit for our own mistakes? So I am declaring that from here on out in this podcast, all further mishaps will be blamed on this podcast villain, this podcast's arch nemesis, the Phantom of the Pod.
The Phantom of the Pod is here. So if you hear audio issues, no, it's not us. It's the Phantom of the Pod. Last episode, my audio was all clicky. I sounded like I was in a wood chipper, and that was not me or my equipment. It was rather...
It was the dastardly Phantom of the Pod.
And unfortunately, the Phantom of the Pod has a visa and can travel very well from both Mexico and the U.S., so prepare.
That's true. He's international.
Well, now that we've introduced the audience to the Phantom of the Pod, Kurt, please regale us with your fun fact.
Now, finally. So, tell me, Luis, if that even is your real name.
Unsure.
True or false?
If it's my real name?
Johnny. Yeah, true.
True or false,
imagine
Luis?
if I said, true or false, is Luis your name? And you said true, and then I was like, no, false. What an existential crisis that would be.
I would not sleep.
True or false, Luis? Johnny Cash was the first American to learn of the death of Joseph Stalin.
Oh, I think I've heard somewhere that it was someone that we don't expect that knew Joseph Stalin was dead. But although Johnny Cash has done crazy things, I don't think it was him. He may have battled several birds in his life, but I don't think he knew of Joseph Stalin.
Johnny Cash got in a fight with birds?
That's a story for another day.
Is that a true fact?
That is a true fact that I'm not getting into currently.
Well, they're both true facts.
Oh.
Johnny Cash also was the first American to learn of the death of Joseph Stalin. He actually served in the U.S. military for a time. He was posted in Germany, and he was the one who received the message in Morse code that Joseph Stalin had.
Wow. What a man.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, that's very... it's one of those moments where you don't really connect two historical events in the same place, right? Like...
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of the story, and I might miss some details in here, but it's like there was this programmer who wrote a bunch of code that saved the Apollo 13 mission, and she did it while she was going into labor to give birth to Jack Black.
Yes. Yeah. It's like Jack
that,
Black's mom saved Tom Hanks.
It's not a really extravagant fact until you get the name at the end and you're like, excuse me?
No, right. Wow. That's crazy. School of Rock and Tenacious D, man.
Sick. Anyway, you have some stories for me, Luis?
I do have stories for you.
You bring it? No cops? Unmarked bills? 2 stories?
Okay. All right. Be quiet. It's my time to shine. I have 2 stories for you, Kurt. I'm glad you mentioned Apollo 13 because we're going to be talking about space. And not only space, but we're going to be talking about another Apollo mission. We all know the Apollo missions. We're familiar with the big ones. What's the big one? 11, big boy mission. Apollo 11,
True.
where they got to the moon. Apollo 13, Tom Hanks peed in a tube and then exploded. You know, we all know that story also. And Jack Black. However, there's
Jack Black was there.
Jack Black was there, and even you were there, Toto. But one of the
everybody take 5. I just want to appreciate that joke
Thank
for
you.
a second. That was nice. Luis.
Stop the-
that was
stop the
really
podcast
nice.
for
I credit where
appreciation.
credit. Yeah, stop the podcast. That was a good joke. Okay.
Thanks, Kurt.
All right, go on.
Anyway.
Proceed. I'll allow it.
One of the missions that doesn't get a lot of notoriety is the Apollo 12 mission. So the mission that, you know, you have a big event happening. It's essentially the middle child of the big Apollo events, which, you know, it's kind of sad, mostly because there's some really, really neat things that went on, which we're going to touch on some of the shenanigans that happened during this mission.
Do you think the Apollo 12 crew was watching the Apollo 11 crew land on the moon and like, you know, say the famous words and stuff, and they're like, man, tough act to follow. We got to step it up, or so. I don't know what, you know, we got to do a dance number when we get there or something, because if we just show up, that's been done.
I'm so very happy you mentioned that, Kurt, because one of the astronauts that was in this project in Apollo 12. So generally, Apollo 12, it has been remembered, or the logs have been remembered as a rather comedic trip. The 3 astronauts that were up there were frankly pretty funny guys, allegedly.
Okay.
There are logs of astronauts up on the moon that, or at least from that trip, which, just to remind you, Kurt, I don't know if you recall who was in the Apollo 12 mission. There were several astronauts, namely 3 of them. Pete Conrad was one of them.
One of the dudes, Pete Conrad. Another person was Al Bean, and the third person was Dick Gordon. Okay, very cool.
Pete Conrad, Al Bean, and Dick Gordon are up in space. They shoot up there, and while they're flying, even from the...
Sorry, pause for 1 second, please. Those are the 3 most made up sounding names I've ever heard. I feel like, why do astronauts always have names that sound really made up?
Yeah.
So that doesn't sway me any further towards thinking that the story is fake. I just wanted to point out, wow, those names sound so
I mean, it sounds like comic book characters, right? Al Bean, Pete Conrad,
yeah,
Dick
that's
Gordon.
what it is. Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
even from liftoff, they were going to be pretty funny, jokey guys. These 3 guys. So
Okay.
there's some crew logs from this entire mission. One of them, Conrad, from the very beginning, Pete Conrad was known as the funny guy of the group, you know, like the Robin Williams type, the ball buster type of the group, you know. And
okay, cool.
And
I like this. They each have a little thing. The funny one, the cute one, the wild card,
and the sex appeal.
And the sex, yeah. The muscle. One of them has to be the muscle.
Right. It's like a breakfast crew, but in space.
Yeah.
So as soon as it started flying, Pete Conrad in the log say, this baby's really going. Which you can imagine. It's Apollo 12. It's the Gemini mission. This bad boy is shaking and just going crazy. And it's like, oh, this bad boy was going. And even when they were...
Big Gen Z energy, that comment has.
Very much so. And this next one, even more so. 36 seconds into the flight, there was a quick flash. A bunch of the fuel cells that were, I guess, providing power to the capsule fell offline, and the alarms went off. And Pete Conrad just said, "The hell was that?" in a very calm voice. And even just said, like, "Hey, okay, guys, we just lost the platform, gang. We had everything in the world drop out." Just intense calm. just that was one of the main things. They just tried to keep a generally light air.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you're going up to space. Even there was one point when Dick Gordon at one point sees the moon come close and yells, "God darn almighty, wasn't that something, babe?" Seriously, and even they would tell each other as they made the trip to the moon, which took about 2 weeks. They would even tell each other compliments, saying like, "Oh, I can't wait to get outside." When they were in the capsule, Al Bean even at one point said, "Hey, you made a beautiful landing. You guys did outstanding targeting. I'll tell you, that thing was right down the middle. It was beautiful."
Hey, that landing, baby boy, sexy.
Right,
okay?
right.
I mean,
Right.
work it. You got it going on.
Exactly.
Come on.
Exactly. So here's where it gets interesting. So the trip, as we know, the trip to the moon is a long one, especially back in this time. It's a very long trip, and the person that was going to land first, I guess the Armstrong of this mission, was going to be Pete Conrad, the funny guy, you know? He was going to be the man of the hour to step outside and just enjoy the first steps on the moon. He was a very good friend of a Italian journalist. They were talking before the flight took place, and she goes up to him, interviews him, and says, "Hey man, there is no way you guys get to say whatever the hell you guys want when you're up in space. Like, it must be planned by NASA. I mean, they've spent so much money just to get up there. You must, like, have a script." And Pete Conrad says, "No, we don't. We literally can say whatever we want. Maybe not swear, because we're probably going to be broadcast, but we can say whatever we want." And so she bet him $500 that he was scripted, and he took the bet. So Pete Conrad gets out of the lunar module and steps down, essentially goes down the ladder and touches down. The moon is kind of cushiony, so he does a quick little jump and lands on the moon. Do you want to take a guess at what his first words on the moon were? You're the second mission, the second first man from the second mission to the moon. What are your words?
Well, for some reason, all the description about him, like, you know, he's slipping his way down into putting his foot on the moon, makes it feel to me like he's gonna twist his ankle or something and just be like, darn it.
Oh no.
But if it was me and I was gonna prove we could say whatever we want, I would be like, I don't know, something about joking about how, like, boy, they really let this soundstage go, huh?
Well, it's kind of familiar because he jumps down to the moon and there's a brief moment of silence and he goes, "Whoopee, man, that may have been a small one for Neil, but that's a long one for me." Indicating to the fact that he had just jumped off the ladder a little bit. Which, great. Starting any sentence with whoopee, that's the most 60s thing you could ever do.
True.
You know?
That's true. That's nice. But maybe it's like that everything comes back into style at a certain point. But this guy has huge Gen Z energy.
Yeah, that's true. He does. Yeah, just the quick whoopee is lovely.
Yeah,
it's really lovely. Now
he would have loved the combination of words "Zooey Mama." I wish he lived to see Zooey Mama.
Zooey Mama.
I know he would have loved that one.
But it kind of continues as they were on the moon. They were grabbing a bunch of stuff, and this is a bit of a conversation that they had while up there. Conrad is just saying, "Okay, very good." Takes a photo. He goes, "Oh, I got it. Oh, right on." He goes, "Oh, nope. Take your time, Al. I'm learning how to do it." During this entire mission, they're kind of just having a blast up in the moon because of course you would.
Just simply vibing on the moon.
And it's interesting. There are some logs, some transcripts of what they were saying, and Pete Conrad even is quoted, because this is an official log from NASA that just says, "Conrad, dum-de-dum-dum-dum," as he's walking down the crater. Yeah, and he goes, "There's no way I wonder if I can get to the bottom of this crater hole. Dum-de-dum-dum-dum. I feel like Bugs Bunny."
See, if the Apollo 10 had successfully gone to the moon, this is what the Apollo 11 mission would have looked like. I think any astronaut group was capable of this. They just happened to be the second ones to go to the moon successfully.
But okay, now this is just to put you in context of the Apollo 12 mission. It's a pretty boring mission, standard mission. They're just getting a bunch of research. Sure, this is a great development of science, awesome science improvement. But I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, you're the second mission to the moon. Not terribly exciting. Now, this actually compounded a little bit in history back on Earth, because one of the main reasons why the first moon landing was so famous, was so popular, was that it essentially was broadcasted on primetime television too, When they arrived on the moon, it was around 9 p.m., at least Central Standard Time, a little later, a little earlier. So people tuned in to watch. People were excited to watch. They brought their families along to watch. That's why it's such a well-remembered moment, not just the fact that it was the first moon landing. So as they set down to the moon, and they're going to make this broadcast, which, by the way, people know that it's not being watched. Why? Because it's being broadcast at around 2 p.m.
Right.
It's not prime time. People are working, and this is the time of history when people are not really watching TV all the time. So it's not prime time.
It's also pre-internet age, so it's not going anywhere else. No one's gonna be clipping it. And
it's also like a Tuesday on Earth. So no one, like everyone's just like, okay, I guess they landed on the moon. And as soon as they landed on the moon and they pulled out a camera, Al Bean, one of the astronauts, pointed the camera at the sun accidentally, which melted all the insides.
Classic Bean, dude.
It's a Bean
Classic
move.
Bean
That's a Bean
boy,
move,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah, it's a Bean move, dude. Come on.
He points the camera at the sun and it fully melts and it fully stops working. Now, if you're on the moon, yeah, this is not a huge deal. It's just your camera. If you're on Earth and you're an NBC executive, Kurt, that has their job on the line to transmit the second moonwalk, you are panicking, right? You are freaking out. You're losing your job. You have just been hired as the person in charge of broadcasting the Apollo 12 mission. And you just got word that your astronauts burned the camera.
What kind of... I feel like I can relate to the NBC executive, because normally, like, a lot of the production gig work I'm doing is like I'm the guy who would have to figure out that problem in that situation. And I can't believe they wouldn't send them with another camera. Maybe they were like, really being particular on the weight of things, because I know it's a big deal for calculating the fuel and stuff. Yeah. But... yeah, I'm sure somebody back on Earth, when they heard that, was like, it would have been so easy to give them a second camera, and now we're so screwed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also the time of the point in space travel when bringing anything else, like you needed to make sure the weight you brought up was minimal, right? Because any pound was huge. Any kilo would add huge amounts of weight or money to the moon. Yeah. Now, they're up there. They're trying to figure out, what are we going to do? Is there a backup camera? Is there something we can do to fix it? The astronauts really don't care. So they say, no, there's nothing we can do. All right. CBS has a backup plan. Don't worry. CBS finds out the voices are still being transmitted. We still have the voices. So we can broadcast the sound, but we need to do something about the image. CBS decided to carry on the live transmission with only the audio, but they did switch to a studio with 2 actors dressed in spacesuits.
Hold.
They did hoax. They did hoax the moon landing, but it's because they pointed the camera at the sun and they only had the audio. So they had people mimicking the moon landing on Earth, but with the audio of the real moon landing.
No, I understand the words you said. I just have some follow-up questions. Did they have these guys on standby? How did they? Because at the point where they're pointing the camera at the sun, they're already on the moon. Yeah. That's the part, you want to be broadcasting probably. Yeah. So, like, and maybe you don't know the answer to this question, but did they already have the 2 guys in the sound studio ready, just in case? And if they did, why? Why do they expect this to happen?
Well,
if not, does that mean that they, 2 in the afternoon, they're like, right now, we need 3 people to go play astronauts. Go get anybody who looks like an astronaut.
Well, I'm assuming they did have this backup plan. Any research I found on this did mention that they did have these as standby. And when I tell you the next the standby that NBC had. So this is what CBS did. They hoaxed the moon landing a soundstage. But what did NBC do? Well, this seems ridiculous. NBC had an even crazier backup plan. They had commissioned a puppeteer that he would be the one that would train Jim Henson to become the Muppet Man. They had commissioned this puppeteer to build astronaut marionettes to have at the ready.
Doing?
And during this broadcast, they would do the same. They broadcasted the audio, but the video was just marionettes being puppeted on a simulated lunar landscape. Kurt.
This is still during the Cold War, right?
This is 1969 actually.
Yeah, so this
1969.
is still during the Cold
this
War.
This is a few months after the first moon landing, so it's still 1969.
Yeah, and they're just gonna. I mean, what are they gonna do when the Soviets are like, "Hey, your moon landing's literally a puppet show"?
Yeah. So
bad look for capitalism, let me tell you.
But here's the thing, Kurt. Because it wasn't the only major headline at the time, and because it broadcasted at such a bad time of day, no one really noticed. And there were some reports that people watching this at the time actually never realized that it wasn't real. Never realized that the pictures they were watching was not the actual moon landing.
They never realized actors' reenactment or the puppet show.
They didn't realize that either. I mean, a lot of the people that saw these.
So the puppet show did broadcast.
Yes, NBC
Insane.
Broadcasted a puppet
Absolutely.
show, and CBS broadcasted live actors on a soundstage.
What is going on?
And it's interesting that, sure, you may be thinking, okay, why did people not care about this? Well, the thing is, yeah, this wasn't the main thing that was bothering the world at the time. I mean, you have, like you mentioned, the Cold War, but also the Vietnam War is going on a lot.
Right.
There's a lot of civilians being killed in different places. And generally, no one cared about Apollo 12. In other terms, like the rest of the mission was spot on, was perfect, really. The only issue was that their camera stopped working and they couldn't film, so they had to hoax it, which
pause for 1 second, please. Luis, sometimes the way that you choose to phrase things is just so delightful.
Okay.
Like just now, I got completely sidetracked because you're just like, the Vietnam War was going on like a lot. And the other day in one of the past episodes, you were like, there's something about the Flat Earth Society, the shot heard around the globe. You're like, which maybe not for them because they're not big on, globe. They're like, yeah, they're not real big globe guys, pretty minor globe dudes.
and this war was going on a lot, really, at this time.
Yeah, and in a big way.
In a huge way, okay. Yeah. It was big. It was big in the U.S. at this point. But yeah, so the
big if true.
Apollo. And of course, the combined effect of Apollo 12 of this camera failure, combined with these weird attempts to mock up a moon landing, would then later
very Cold War era U.S. government, for
right?
Sure.
But this is one of the reasons, or one of the main driving forces of the burgeoning conspiracy theories that the moon landing was hoaxed, right?
Oh,
so the combined of all of
they
this,
were right all along.
Yeah, like of course this is fueling all those rumors because I mean technically yes, the Apollo 12 landing was hoaxed, but the broadcast was right. So that's what would happen. A lot of civilians didn't really notice because it wasn't prime time, and there's really no surviving record of this. Like the only record you can find is brief snippets of like a marionette, and the marionettes, there are pictures existing of these marionettes, of the puppets that were used for the moon landing, but it really was not something. It's a piece of lost media. But it's confirmed.
I wonder what they did with the marionettes afterwards.
From what I understand, they're currently in a museum, Curtis.
Nah, that makes
one
sense.
of them is at a museum. The other one has been auctioned off, from what I understand.
It'd be cool to see them like perform with Kermit the Frog, and Kermit sings like "Over the Rainbow" or something. I don't know.
That's true. It's part of the Muppet Show.
Something like that.
It was reutilized
It
was reutilized into being the Great Gonzo. Maybe.
Yes, that's nice.
But yeah, that was in 1969, Apollo 12. It was hoaxed. And to end this story of the fun astronauts, turns out according to Pete Conrad, he never got the $500 of the bet he won by saying whoopee in space.
Are you kidding me?
So after he went to space, made a couple of jokes, a couple of zingers, and then faked his moon landing, he never even got his money.
Who bets $500 and has no plans to pay up?
Unclear.
I feel like that's a lot of money for a joke bet.
Yeah, right. So that's the first story, Kurt. I think it's just a quick little one, but it's one of these cold, like you said, Cold War missions that it almost seems science fiction-y.
The reenactment with the actors on the soundstage, that's outlandish, but like I can wrap my head around a U.S. broadcast network saying like, yeah, we should just reenact it. Sure, we'll just get it in post-production. But the Marionette puppet show, that's crazy. That's just unhinged.
We were on the space age, and now we're going to go to the dark age, Kurt.
Ooh. Are there going to be puppets?
I'm afraid there's going to be a significant lack of puppets.
Pass. Pick a different story.
This next story, we're going to take it way back to 1170. The 1170s, the great 70s, the great decade.
Nice. The 70s.
The 70s. We're taking to 1170, and we are taking it to the Levant. We are going to the Holy Land. Because, Kurt, what is happening around this time of the world? Well, first of all, Dark Ages. We love that. Medieval times with a significant lack of dinner theater and way more actual stabbing.
Not medieval times trademark.
Yeah. This is not
lowercase medieval times.
Yeah, medieval times, lowercase m, lowercase t. Yeah. We're going back to this era, and by this point, Jerusalem is a kingdom. It's one of the famous Crusader states. Why is it a Crusader state? The first crusade, Kurt, if you may recall, happened in 1099.
Mm-hmm. The 90s.
Yeah, in the 90s.
This bit's not that funny, but I'm going to keep it up because I enjoy it. Most people don't know the first crusade was actually highly motivated by Y2K.
I think this is Y1K.
Y1K.
So essentially they take Jerusalem, the Christians do, the Christian Europeans do, Western Europeans. They arrive at Jerusalem, take the city for their own, and establish a Crusader state, a empire, or I guess a kingdom from Jerusalem, which essentially takes up a lot of what is now, I guess, Israel. It was the kingdom of Jerusalem at this point. And they set up these kingdoms, and they established, I guess, the Baldwin dynasty. Why do I call it the Baldwin dynasty? Because from the 150 years from 1099 to 1170s, there were only kings named Baldwin. So Baldwin the First, Baldwin the Second, Baldwin the Third. But don't worry, baby, we're focusing on Baldwin the Fourth. We love Baldwin the Fourth. At this point, it's 1165, 1170. Baldwin is a young man, kingdom of Jerusalem.
Set the scene. It's 1169. We're 4 Baldwins deep. We're in Jerusalem.
Technology is nothing but a memory. You open your eyes. 2022 is gone. It's 1165. You're in Jerusalem. You're in a Crusader state.
Every person you're related to is named Baldwin.
Your daughter, Baldwin. Your sister, Baldwin.
True.
Your dad, Baldwin.
Pet goldfish?
Baldwin. Now, at this point, the kingdom of Jerusalem is pretty much isolated from the rest of the world. Why? Because everything around the borders of the Christian kingdom is all Islamic empires, Islamic kingdoms, Islamic caliphates. So they are essentially surrounded by Islam and Muslim influence at the time. So we have the Umayyad Empire, the Umayyad Caliphate. We have the Umayyad Caliphate, the Fatimid Caliphate, all surrounding the borders of the Jerusalem kingdom. This is bad news bears for all the kings of Jerusalem. It's bad news bears because your entire point of going to the Holy Land was to take it and then try to keep everyone else from coming in. So there's no real expansion.
Right.
There's no real expansion. Most of what you're doing is defensive warfare against these Islamic states. So for the majority of all these dynasties, or this dynasty, the Baldwin dynasty, all of these kings are fighting at the borders, essentially in what we would now call trench warfare.
I think is a major oversight for a bunch of people to pick the same location for their Holy Lands, Like if anyone out there is considering starting a new religion, there's a lot of real estate in the Dakotas that is pretty cheap, and there's a lot of supply and not very much demand. I think go there, probably not have to fight too many holy wars.
I mean, yeah, who all is going to Butte, Montana these days?
Yeah. I'm just saying, I think there's a lot of land out there that has Holy Land potential that's really being underutilized. I don't know. I don't know. I got it. I'm working on a little grassroots.
We're workshopping this.
Yeah.
We're workshopping this.
Yeah.
So, like I said, most of this was trench warfare. So decades would go by and not a lot of land would be traded. It was just a big give and take, a big tug of war between the different caliphates and the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem. Baldwin comes along.
Right.
The
fourth.
He becomes king at a fairly young age, at the age of 12, which pretty standard at the time. He's a pretty good kid. Mm-hmm. Good kid, raised
the ripe old age of 12.
Right, yeah. Grows up to be a fairly competent ruler. He cares about his people, and he actually is a fairly good strategist. So by all historical standards, great king. He just has one fatal flaw, Kurt. Much like any good hero of old, he has one fatal flaw. What is it? Is it that he's too jealous? No. Is it that he's too selfish? No. You guessed it, Kurt. He has leprosy.
You hate to see it.
He caught leprosy as a young child, and, well, unfortunately, leprosy at this point was the treatment for leprosy at this point was prayer, and if you're lucky, a bunch of bandages with ointments. If you're a king, which he did, he actually covered most of his body in bandages with different ointments to keep his leprosy at bay. Luckily, too, from what we can hear, it was not a very debilitating case of leprosy. So he was able to continue ruling. But he actually went to a bunch of wars when he was young and fought in a bunch of battles but when he was young. But here's a quick note about him going out to battles. He would cover himself in bandages, as I told you,
right?
To keep his leprosy at bay. And he would cover himself head to toe, like really throughout his whole body, limbs, even face, to the point where his friends and people around him, he had the nickname Baldwin the Beaten, which that's not really its actual translate. The alliteration like this did not happen.
Yeah,
that good. But that's essentially what you could translate it. Essentially because they said, oh, he must be very clumsy. He must be falling off his horse a lot. Haha, and he has a lot of bruises, or he cuts himself too much. Essentially calling him clumsy. That's why he covered himself with bandages. No one really knew that he had leprosy.
So it was a secret then that he had leprosy.
Yeah, it wasn't hugely known that he had leprosy. It was very much kept literally under wraps.
Because I know they used to have like leper colonies where it's like, and in the olden days, if you get leprosy, you just get thrown out of town. So I was thinking it's pretty impressive that he still was able to take the throne despite having leprosy.
I mean, Kurt, remember, you're the king. You kind of have to keep this stable empire. You don't want to lose it to the Islam states.
Right.
You have to keep a facade. And luckily, he was very mobile and moved a lot. But I just love the image of you're in battle and literally the mummy just shows up.
Yeah, it'd be pretty spooky.
Just like a toilet paper mummy shows up with a two-handed sword and starts attacking. That's great. That's a great mental image. But he would do that. There came a point where he grew a little older and wasn't very much able to go out into the field and fight as fiercely as he once was able to. What with the leprosy,
Right, of course.
The leprosy that was having a blast in his body. And you don't want to be in the middle of fighting a battle and then your arm falls off because your sword is too heavy, stuff like that.
What is leprosy mostly like a disease of the skin, or what does it affect the most? I feel like it's not something I encounter enough in my modern life to know detailedly what it does.
Leprosy is a disease that essentially you lose all sense of touch.
Oh, okay.
That's one of the things that happens. You get intense nerve damage, which means that your nerves stop working, which can lead to you cutting yourself and getting an infection and never noticing.
Huh.
So
it would actually help you in battle, hypothetically, because you wouldn't, you would still feel internal pain, but you wouldn't feel external pain. That's really interesting.
I guess so. But it's also a degenerative disease, right? So there's bacteria on there, which is eating not only at your nerves, but your respiratory tract, your skin, your eyes too. So it's pretty debilitating, but generally, that's why you could go several years without noticing you have leprosy, which is something interesting. But it is very debilitating. And at this point, it was also seen as a bit of a life sentence,
Right.
a death sentence. I mean.
Right.
Now, when Baldwin IV was not good to fight anymore, he had an idea because he needs to keep the other caliphates at bay.
What if I stop having leprosy?
No.
No.
He had a brilliant idea.
Give
So
all the
he
other
got
kings
all
leprosy.
We're getting to it.
I'll shut up.
Please hold your horses, Kurt. We'll get to the leprosy
I'm
soon
just
enough.
so excited about this leprosy.
Wow.
Sorry, continue.
So he gathers his emissaries and says, gather the most beautiful, the best women from across the Jerusalem kingdom. 150 of them, gather them and bring them to the court.
Okay.
Like most beautiful, most attractive, most representative of our Christian identity as a crusader
Yes.
state.
Christianity's next top model.
Exactly. Why 150? Well, because 150 was significant because when his father became king, it was the 150th year anniversary from the founding of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. So there was a bit of symbolism to all of this. And so all of these women are gathered up and brought to the palace in Jerusalem. And now they're told to sit outside the king's chambers and wait. Baldwin IV begins asking these women one by one into his bedchambers and proceeds to have intimate physical interactions, intimate physical relations with these women.
Interesting.
One by one. Now, if we think about this, Kurt, how is leprosy transferred? Mostly
Right.
skin contact,
Right.
spread between people. So this was, let's just say it, a great day for Baldwin. Great day for Baldwin. He had a fantastic Tuesday. However, not a great day for his sister, which was just there witnessing this whole thing, as well as the 150 Jerusalem kingdom women who now had leprosy.
I feel like I can maybe see kind of where this is going, but I'm just really laughing at like him explaining this plan to someone. Like someone's like, "Sire, what's our foreign policy?" And he's like, "Okay, we round up the 150 most attractive women. Hear me out. I bang all of them. Hear me out."
You won't believe what happens next.
Maybe that was his solution to every problem. They were like, "We really gotta we gotta get some kind of water cleaning or water pollution system because it's just getting disgusting."
Bring me 100 women.
Bring me 100 women. I'm gonna sleep with them.
So he sleeps with all these women. Long story short, he sleeps with all these women and then gathers all his emissaries and says, send them as gifts of Thanksgiving, as gifts of our peace, our continued peace and perseverance with all of you different caliphates. So he sends all these women to the different dukedoms, the different duchies, the different caliphates as prize concubines. And mind you, these concubines, probably some of them don't know they have leprosy. And they're just like, okay, getting sold into slavery. Whoopsie.
Did they at least know they were concubines? Because he didn't round up concubines, did he? Like, it was just regular women.
Yes, but if the king says, go there, you're a concubine now.
Right. But I was just clarifying that point. They weren't previously concubines.
No,
just
they were.
One day
they were
living your
free
normal life, next day leprosy concubine. That's tough.
Yeah. One day you're going about your day. The next day you're a sex slave and also have leprosy. A rough day for Jerusalem women that day.
So what happened?
Now, all of these different dukes now have concubines. And, well, reports from the time or history books of the time, actually Josephus, a famed historian of the time, mentions that there was outbreaks of leprosy in some of the higher ranks of different royal families within these different sultanates, these different caliphates. So high-ranking officials would get leprosy. Some members of the royal court would get leprosy, and even some rulers would get leprosy.
Wow.
And it was bad. So what do you do when a lot of your high-ranking officials have leprosy? Well, you don't go to war. Baldwin played the smartest biological warfare.
He weaponized the cheese touch, dude. Remember the cheese touch from Diary of a Wimpy Kid? He made that into
We're back to Zooey Mama.
Yeah,
he's Zooey Mama at this whole thing.
Speaking of Gen Z traits, it always come back to Diary of a Wimpy Kid?
It always comes back to Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
The sacred texts.
The sacred texts. So luckily, this was able to save Baldwin enough time for him to die.
Sick.
Right? So yeah, like he did get a very bad case of leprosy eventually later on in life. And by later on in life, I mean like 35.
So the end of my fictitious plan, step 19 or whatever of I round up 150 women, I bang all of them. The last step is I die. That is what you're talking.
The last step is I die happy knowing Jerusalem hasn't been conquered.
I sleep with all of them. Hear me out. Everyone gets leprosy. Hear me out. I die. Not my problem anymore.
Yeah. Maybe I died from leprosy, but at least the Holy Land is safe.
Nice.
So I think reports say that his eyelids stopped working, so his eyes dried out, so he even became blind by the end of his life and just died.
He could have closed them, manually by hand. I feel like he could.
That's too
tried.
Easy. That's letting them win. That's letting the Crusaders down. God would not want this.
So right. You're so
Do you
right.
think God closes his eyes manually? Absolutely not.
No way.
Do you think the Christian God does this, Kurt?
No way, dude. No way.
Absolutely not.
You're so right.
Now, he dies not too long after. He dies at the ripe age of 35 from his bout of leprosy.
Right.
And life goes on. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Here is where we do the record scratch.
In order to cover up his death, they made a leprous marionette puppet.
Oh, I wish. CBS went to a soundstage and gave 150 women leprosy.
They could just bandage the puppet. No one would know, dude. No one knows what he looks like.
Right. Whenever all these high royals and different heads of caliphates died, that led to a bit of a power vacuum around the Islamic states and the Islamic empires that were there at the time. Who was a big player soon after Baldwin died? Well, around this time, we also get the famous strategian and sultan Saladin, or Salahuddin, however you want to say it. Saladin, at this point, was sultan of Egypt and Syria, and he saw this opportunity of all these leaders dying of poisoned concubines and decided to seize the day, to carpe that diem, and consolidated the power of the Islamic Muslim states there and formed a huge empire and a huge army, a really wide-spanning army that could conquer empires. And Saladin never himself got leprosy because he was known as very selfless. So when he was actually offered a concubine, he said, "No, let my best soldiers have her." So he never himself got leprosy because he was a good boy and because he loved his wife. He actually was reported to be so smitten by his wife that he would not dare touch anyone else. But anyway.
Should have gave her leprosy. Come on. It's easy fixes to these problems, guys. Okay, come on.
The 2020 vision we have looking back is sometimes sad, right? So he consolidates all this huge power and army and decides to march into Jerusalem and take back the Holy Land, and does it with very little obstacles. He conquers it easily, and Saladin takes back the Holy Land because he had all this power from this power vacuum that had happened. So Baldwin may have slowed the spread of Islam into the kingdom of Jerusalem by giving everyone leprosy, but he inadvertently made this man powerful enough to conquer the kingdom.
Yeah, he kind of eliminated everyone else.
So clumsy Baldwin the Broken, really, really, really lived up to his name. He didn't live to see this, but his ancestors and his children and his sister fully were killed. But He died thinking and knowing that he had done God a favor.
You know what? Someone else is king at that point, though. I think he did his job. I think it's success for Baldwin number 4. Like, if you're king, you don't have to worry about what happens after you're gone. You know, that's someone else's problem.
It's true.
I think a good place to start with setting the bar at is keep things stable while you're in power. You know, most kings have a lot of trouble with that. So if you can just make it through your own reign, that's pretty good.
So that's the story of how leprosy brought an end to Christian holdings of Jerusalem between the first and the second crusades.
You guys would not believe how many people Luis gave leprosy to before he went back to Mexico. It's insane.
No comment. But then again, and this is also a discussion for another day, but the first crusade was also always bound to fail, and the subsequent crusades that came after all failed. So really, like the Western European Christians had no right being in that place at that time. So maybe it serves them right that they all got leprosy and died. Anyway. Well, Kurt, now that you have the information on both, I think it's time for one of our favorite moments of making these, which I think is time for deliberation. So, Kurt, there are 2 stories for you. The one you just heard, it's Baldwin IV's leprosy bomb, or alternate title, Medieval Times with 100% more leprosy.
Yeah.
And the first story I told you, in case you've forgotten already, was the great Apollo 12 puppet show, the hoax that started all hoaxes, the sound stages and the puppets that were used just because no one was tuning in to the Apollo 12 moon landing.
Okay.
Those are your 2 stories. Those are your 2 choices, Kurt. What do you think?
I like that both of these stories have a scheme going on. You know, everybody loves a good scheme. Both these, we got the puppet scheme on one hand, maybe even the soundstage scheme, to be honest, because there's like 2 schemes in that one. And then on the other hand, a little leprosy scheme. You know, I like when someone says, "Let me just do something so sneaky and mischievous that people will always talk about it." That's a fun little thing. And let's see, both schemes, it seems like I would say successful.
Yeah, I would say so too. Yeah.
Right?
Very, very successful.
Even though we do now know that the puppets were puppets and that the leprosy was intentionally spread. And I guess, of course, one of these is probably not a real thing that happened. But, you know, both of them, I say gold star. Good job. You schemed and it paid off. It worked.
I think that's a review of Ocean's 11. Good job, guys. You schemed and you did it. Proud of you.
You came, you schemed, you conquered.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Veni skidi skichi. Wait. I've had. I'm done. I'm out.
No, you're on a roll, Luis. You got some good ones in this episode.
Thank you. I'm feeling
you know?
very funny haha today.
Yeah. You're really grown into yourself.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you, kid.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Kurt.
So, I feel like I got distracted with enjoying both these stories so much. I barely had any time to think about which one I believe or do not believe. Okay, so let me think about the astronaut story first. Okay, I know I said that everything in this story it's like so perfect to the time and place that it feels made up. Like the astronaut names are, like I was saying before, feel so much like fake comic book characters, like all astronauts' names do. And just I think it's the double of a soundstage is like, yeah, of course the U.S. would try that. And then the marionette puppets, of course the U.S. in the 60s would try that.
Right.
And I also find it very believable that, yeah, obviously after Apollo 11, the other moon expeditions were just like, phoning it in a little bit, kind of having some fun with it. I would be too. I mean, who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't? Yeah, who wouldn't?
It's, it's going to the moon. It's not rocket science, okay? That being said.
Okay, hold on.
Wait a minute. The Baldwin story, I'm really stuck on you're good naming in this because I really like that all the kings were named Baldwin. Even if this is the fake story, that you probably, I'm guessing, like found that somewhere, or there were a bunch of kings named Baldwin. But I really like that they were all named Baldwin. I don't know if I can credit you with that or not, but if you came up with that, good job.
I'm gonna say thank you anyway, just so because it feels nice.
Yeah, you can pretend you have my approval. Yeah, that's nice for you. We both get something out of this.
Wow. Yikes.
Okay. Here's the thing. Both of them I find believable just in the weird schemes people will make up. I find the Marionette soundstage one a little more believable. Maybe it's just because I am more familiar with what the U.S. government does than what the First Crusade was like. But that one just really feels true to me. So I think that I'm going to say that I believe the Apollo 12 soundstage puppet show is the true story.
All right, Kurt.
That's my final answer.
Final answer: puppet show, puppets in space, puppets in space.
Cosmic puppet show. Yes.
The cosmic puppet show is indeed the true story, Kurt.
Whoa!
You are very correct. That is very much a very true story that really literally happened. NASA's probably best mission up to that point was so silly and went really well, except for the Earth side of things, essentially.
Right.
But luckily, they had backups. And if you're wondering what the spacemen suits that they used for Marionette's were, Kurt, I have a picture, one of the only picture that survives of these marionettes, which I'm about to send you.
Oh, please.
Please describe what you see.
Okay. So it looks like it's a side shot of an astronaut suit, although it has a lot less detail on it, it looks like. And it appears to be in the air with one leg up. It looks like it's supposed to be kind of in the middle of floating. What really surprises me is that the cables on it are on the bottom of the suit, not the top. So it's not like suspended to the ceiling. It's actually being like lifted up from the ground. For some reason, I was thinking these would be close to life size, but they're like really tiny, like the size of just some random puppet you would buy.
Yeah, they're
not even the second picture. It's even less detailed. I mean, this is not fooling anyone by any means.
But then you have to remember.
Wow.
So yes, indeed, these are about 2 feet tall puppets. Really, they are puppets. But you have to remember, you are seeing this through a very grainy TV from 1969 in black and white. So you have a lot of forgiveness there.
I understand you could force a perspective on how big it is, but like it doesn't have anything on the sleeves. It's just like solid white sleeves. Like there's, as far as I can see, there's no American flag, or there's like no pockets on the suit. That's what I'm saying when it's like it's very, very simple. There's not any design or really anything. It just looks like someone wearing a solid white shirt, solid white pants, a really simple space helmet, and then like some sort of backpack strapped to their chest. Mm-hmm. Almost looks like they have like a seatbelt on their chest, or something like seatbelt colored.
A papoose, almost.
Yeah.
And we'll share these pictures on our Instagram and Twitter, so you see these. But really, I mean, it makes a lot of sense that they would use something like this. And if you're a skilled puppeteer, you can make it look real, frankly. Especially with such low fidelity that you would have. And also you can even say, oh, this is bad. However, there are tales that said that the TV screen actually mentioned simulated. It said simulated.
Oh, really?
It did say simulated, but people still believe that that's what happened. People still believe that what they were seeing was a true image. So very 1960s.
Also, like you said before, it's the second moon landing, so it's significantly less important than the first one, and it's at 2 p.m. So it's probably not a lot of people watching it, and also like not a lot of people looking super closely at it.
Right.
Especially since it's broadcast on multiple networks, so even then you're like splitting the audience in half. Yeah, there's probably not very many people who really saw the puppet show, and probably the ones who did see it weren't looking super close at it because they had already seen someone walk on the moon, just recently.
Yeah, and shoot, I mean, radio is king at this point too, Kurt. So, and if you do have the radio sound waves coming or the audio waves coming in, then you're not going to really bother watching the TV screen, right?
True.
That was that. Actually, I'm going to play right now the first words on the moon, because the first words on the moon were whoopee. That may have been a big step for Neil, but that's a long one for me. We're going to go ahead and play it right here. What do you think, Kurt? Those are the first words on the moon.
I really underestimated how gleeful that whoopee is. I thought he's like, "Zoo-wee, mom, I'm on the moon," but he's like, "Whoopee!"
Whoopee!
Yeah, like fully a cartoon character.
Yeah, right. So yeah, those were the first words spoken by Pete
It seems
Conroy.
like they went out of their way to find the worst microphone they could, or what?
They're on the moon, Kurt. Give them some slack.
All the power of the U.S. government. You and I have better microphones in front of us right now.
Yeah, we also have better computers on our phones than the entire space program back in the day, Kurt. So
yeah, it's true. But seriously, to watch that, it feels much older than it is, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's less than one lifetime away from us, and it's like just between the microphone and the black and white and the sound cutting out, and just how surreal it is to think of like our space and science programs just more in their infancy, where going as far as the moon was a really big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know. I mean, obviously you and I are both really big history guys. That's why we do this podcast. So maybe it's interesting to me in a way that other people wouldn't enjoy, just to think about how long history is and also how short it is at the same time, how much things have changed and how much people are still just people saying things like, "Whoopee, I'm on the moon," you know?
Right. So that's the first story. Very real Cold War-esque stuff. But moving on to the Baldwin story. It's made up by me. There was. Look at you go. So did you make up the Baldwins? That's one of the few things I didn't make up. Baldwin the Fourth was a real king, but his entire lineage was not exclusively Baldwin. Like there were other names too, but yeah, his name was Baldwin, and he lived a pretty unremarkable life. Like
no leprosy.
No, he did have leprosy. That's one thing that was kept, but he did have leprosy, didn't have a kid, and died at 25.
Shame.
And that's it. Really, nothing happened.
And did anything happen after he died?
After he died, there was a lot of internal politics within a lot of bureaucracy shifts within the Kingdom of Jerusalem that led to bad organization and bad army leadership that just led to them losing. There was no leprosy bomb.
So it did lead to the downfall of the First Crusade after he died. But it wasn't, at least from what you're describing, it seems like it wasn't out of consequence of him dying or anything that he did. It was just kind of coming either way.
It was going to happen. And Saladin had his eye on Jerusalem anyway for a while. And he died, and several years later he took Jerusalem. Like, really, it was going to happen, him there or not. But there was never any leprosy bomb. The only person that was really affected by leprosy was him. Which, frankly, sad.
The leprosy bomb plan, that's tough to give up, you know? Just to, like, you know, I now have to accept that this story is not true. That's a tough one to lose. Because we always say, like, we hate to have to find out which one is not the true story. That's hard to lose the leprosy bomb. But for the knowledge that these 150 women were not forced to sleep with the leprous king and then become concubines, I'm happy with it. Net win for
net win for humanity. Yeah, and that one.
I mean, yeah, you know, I would have loved to see the leprosy bomb scheme come into play. But I'm happy for those 150 fictitious women that they could avoid that. They could not get caught up in the gears and mechanisms of the leprosy scheme.
He didn't fight bandaged. He didn't fight bandaged. He didn't really go to many battles. He died a very young king from his leprosy. But then that inspired the movie Kingdom of Heaven by Ridley Scott, which, as you may know, is a favorite movie of myself and our other roommate from the time. Kurt.
I have never seen this movie, but I am sure it is not as fun as the story you made, full of mummy kings and leprosy schemes.
But anyway, that was a made-up story. I thought about it as I was driving home from work the other day.
Nice. I enjoyed that. That was fun.
Yeah, but hey, you sniffed it out. You correctly understand your context of the 1970s.
I did. What's our score now? Do I have any hope of comeback?
Let me tally this up. Hold on. All right, Kurt, so you're catching up because I am still on the lead with 8, but you're catching up with 5. You're coming close, pal.
Ooh, watch out. Hang on.
Watch out, my friend. Watch out, my friend. But with that, I think you're getting better at sniffing, so I need to amp up the smoke and the mirrors. We'll see.
Yes.
And
more smoke, more mirrors.
And I guess more scheming. That's the end. That's the end for this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully, if you were listening along, hopefully you guessed correctly. And if you didn't, whoops, that may have been a long step for... Anyway, thank you for listening to this episode. Feel free to follow us along in our personal lives. Our Twitter sometimes gets a little crazy. Feel free to follow us if you can. We are at Unbelievable PC. We're also on Instagram, where we sometimes post some handsome pics of the boys, aka Kurt and I. We are at Unbelievable Pod. Very fun stuff on there. And you can find us really most places you find audio-based entertainment. If you like Spotify, we're there. If you like Apple, we're there. Google, we're there. You can find us on Podchaser and Good Pots as well. Where aren't we, Kurt?
Next question.
All right, cool. So with that, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate everyone that supported us for this whole time. Keep listening, keep sharing if you like it. And if you don't like it, whatever.
You can't stop us.
Can't stop us. There'll be
Go ahead, try.
Go ahead and try.
Yeah, go ahead and try.
So thanks a lot for listening. My name is Luis, joined here by Kurt. Thank you for listening to Unbelievable. We'll catch you next time. See ya.
Don't get caught up in any leprosy or marionette-based schemes.